Hello, this is Group 5. In this video, we'll briefly introduce VR and AR. VR stands for Virtual Reality. According to the dictionary, virtual means being such in essence or effect, though not formally recognized or admitted. Defining reality is more difficult, so for now let's just use a simplified version. It is something that exists and we can experience. Throughout the history, humans have come up with different ways to communicate their ideas. Indeed, the history of mankind has been marked with the progression of new media. VR is one of the latest and most interesting steps. Just like cave painting and written language, VR is a medium. There are 5 key elements of the VR experience. First one is the participant. Actually, it might also be the most important element. The experience will be different for every single participant, since the magic happens in their mind. The VR experience will be affected by the individual capacities, interpretations, background, and history. Thus, different people will experience the same thing in their own unique way. It might be surprising, but VR experience can also be created for non-human participants. We'll come back to this topic later. The second key element is the person or team that designs and implements the application and the system as a created work. We call them the creators or composers of the work. The experience is created as a collective work between the creators and the participants. That's why they are both crucial to the VR. The third element is a virtual world. A virtual world is an imaginary space that is usually manifested through a medium. Please be aware that a virtual world can exist without being displayed in a VR system. A computer-based virtual world is the description of a collection of objects within a simulation. It does not require a medium to exist. For a VR experience to be enjoyable and convincing, it must be immersive. Here, immersion have 2 different meanings: mental immersion and physical immersion. For most media, being immersed basically means the user or the viewer is deeply engaged mentally. For VR, we also emphasize the importance of physical immersion, the bodily entering into a medium. VR allows the participants to use their physical senses to experience and imagine the reality, something that we usually see in our dream or using our imagination. To achieve physical immersion, sensory feedback is crucial. A VR system replaces or augments the stimuli to the participants' senses. When the user moves their head or move forward, the things they see should reflect their movement. A typical VR system will track the head and at least one hand of the participant. For many cases, haptic responses is also very important. Many controllers or gloves provide force feedback by limiting the movement of the finger. The last element is interactivity. More traditional media like painting or photography only provide static, third-person experience. In VR, however, the user has the ability to affect the virtual world. The user also have the ability to change their vantage point within the virtual world. Being interactive makes VR more compelling than the previous media. Now we can provide a more formal definition of virtual reality. Virtual reality is a medium composed of interactive computer simulations that sense the participant's position and actions and replace or augment the feedback to one or more senses, giving the feeling of being mentally immersed or present in the simulation. Now let's talk about AR. AR stands for augmented reality. It is a medium in which real-time interactive digital information is overlaid on the physical world that is in both spatial and temporal registration with the physical world. The overlaid information enhances or augments the user's perceived reality. In some cases, augmentation means the digital removal of real-world information in order to reduce the complexity of the scene. Registration means the virtual overlay is aligned to the real world. This is crucial for augmented reality. VR and AR are closely related. They have many things in common. They are both physically immersive media. Both of them require real-time interaction and accurate registration. There's one major difference between VR and AR. AR alters the user's perception of the real world by adding layers of virtual objects to the real environment. In VR, the user sees and interacts with a completely virtual environment. AR can be considered a special case of VR. Rather than experiencing physical reality, the viewer is placed in another reality that includes both physical and the virtual. They are placed along with each other. Conversely, VR can be considered a special case of AR, in which the real world is occluded entirely. Some people use the notion XR to refer to both of them. XR is sometimes expressed as cross reality. There are several misconceptions about VR and AR. Here we want to address 3 common ones. First, only human participants can experience VR and AR. Second, the only way to experience VR and AR is to wear a headset. Third, VR and AR came from nowhere several years ago. Let's go through each of them and see why they are wrong. As mentioned before, VR experience can be created for non-human participants as well. One good example is a study conducted by neuroscientist Florian Eggert. In the study, a newly born zebrafish was put into an aquatic matrix. The zebrafish thinks it is moving the tail to counteract the current, but it is not actually happening. It was paralyzed and held still by the glass pipette. Only the neuron firing was recorded. The current are just simple patterns projected to the bottom of the glassware. In another study, researchers made a pair of 3D glasses for the praying mantis to study the 3D vision in mantises. For many people, experiencing VR and AR means wearing a headset or a pair of goggles. It might be the most popular method, but it is by no means the only way to enjoy the VR/AR experience. VR/AR technology platforms can be roughly divided into 3 paradigms: head-based, stationary, and hand-based. A head-mounted display, or HMD for short, is a head-based device. Images are displayed on a pair of screens, and the sensors track the position of the head, or at least where the user is looking at. Using a headset, the user can examine a virtual object in the same way he or she interacts with a real one. Therefore, it is very intuitive and natural to use for most users. Next, we have the stationary paradigm. The hardware is not worn or carried by the viewer. Instead, it is located in a fixed position in a place, and the participant goes to where the system is to enjoy the VR/AR experience. One popular example is the CAVE system. CAVE stands for Cave Automatic Virtual Environment. Instead of small screens close to the eyes, it uses large projection screens to surround the viewers with the computer-generated imagery. The position of the viewer is also tracked. When the user walks freely in the environment, the scenes on the screen will be correctly calculated and rendered. There's one advantage over HMDs. The user can see him or herself and the surrounding environment. The third paradigm is the hand-based. The user holds something like a smartphone or a smart tablet in their hand, and they use that to display the information of the virtual world. Smartphones nowadays usually have big high-definition screens, decent computing power, and various sensors. These features make smart devices an ideal option for AR applications. Many VR headsets came to the market in 2016, leading some people to believe that VR, AR are pretty new stuff and came from nowhere. That is not true. Let's take a look at some milestones in the history of VR, AR. In 1838, Charles Wheatstone invents the stereoscope, a device that presents two separate photos to the viewer. In 1916, the first HMD was patented to Albert B. Pratt. In 1956, Morton Hillig developed Sensorama, a multimodal experience display system. It is the most famous invention of Hillig, and this is the reason he has been considered the father of virtual reality by many. 4 years later, Hillig received a US patent for a stereoscopic television apparatus for individual use. You may find it very similar to later HMDs. In 1963, MIT student Ivan Sutherland presented his Sketchpad, the first program to utilize a complete graphical user interface. Five years later, Sutherland, a student, created a system nicknamed the Sword of Damocles, which is widely considered the first VR HMD. This device is barely usable. It is so heavy that it must be suspended from the ceiling to use. The display provided stereoscopic visuals, mechanical and ultrasonic tracking. Although primitive, it shows the potential of VR. In 1984, Gerald Lanier founded VPL Research. 5 years later, VPL announces RB2 virtual reality system. The phrase virtual reality was first introduced. As you can see, VR and AR do not just come from nowhere. Let's do a quick review of this video. VR is a medium of communication. VR requires physical immersion, which is one of the defining characteristics of the medium. AR is also a physically immersive medium. AR requires accurate registration. VR and AR are closely related, but not the same. That's all for the presentation. Thank you for watching.